There are connections in this world that do not unfold in daylight. They do not announce themselves with grand gestures or public declarations. They live in glances that linger a second too long, in conversations that carry an invisible depth, in silence that feels heavier than words. When a relationship is forbidden, love does not disappear, it transforms. It becomes restrained, internalized, sacred, and painfully alive. A forbidden connection often awakens something ancient within the psyche. It activates the parts of us we keep hidden, the shadow, the longing, the unlived life. Sometimes this person loves you in silence not because their feelings are weak, but because their reality is complicated. Circumstances, commitments, social expectations, moral boundaries, or timing stand like walls between two souls who recognize each other too clearly. And so the love moves inward. Instead of confession, there is distance. Instead of possession, there is observation. They may withdraw unexpectedly, not because they feel nothing, but because they feel too much. The forbidden nature of the bond intensifies it. What cannot be expressed outwardly grows stronger internally. The psyche magnifies what it cannot resolve. Silence, in this case, is not indifference. It is containment. To love someone you cannot have requires enormous psychological tension. One part of them wants to reach for you, another part knows they must not. This inner conflict creates restraint. They may show care in subtle ways, remembering small details, protecting your reputation, supporting you quietly, or appearing at moments when you need strength but never claiming credit. Their love becomes protective rather than possessive. There is also fear. Forbidden love threatens identity. It challenges the roles they play in their current life. To act on these feelings may mean dismantling structures they have built. Relationships, family systems, social images, personal values. Not everyone is ready to confront that level of upheaval. So instead they choose silence as a form of survival. But silence does not mean absence. You may feel it in the intensity of their gaze, in the way conversations suddenly become profound, in the emotional charge that lingers even after they leave the room. There is an unspoken understanding, a recognition of what could be, and a shared awareness of why it cannot be. Forbidden love often serves as a mirror. It reveals unmet needs, hidden desires, and the parts of ourselves we have neglected. Sometimes this person enters your life, not to stay, but to awaken you. The impossibility of the relationship forces both individuals to confront their own limitations, fears, and attachments. And yet, there is dignity in restraint. Loving in silence can be an act of maturity. It can mean choosing long-term integrity over short-term passion. It can mean respecting boundaries even when the heart protests. It can mean understanding that not every powerful connection is meant to be lived outwardly. Some loves are karmic, intense, transformative, but not permanent. They exist to shift your consciousness, not to build a shared home. The tragedy of forbidden love is not that it exists, but that it cannot manifest without destruction. So this person may love you quietly from a distance, carrying the weight of what cannot be spoken. Their silence is not emptiness. It is discipline. It is fear. It is protection. It is sacrifice. And sometimes the most powerful love stories are the ones that never become visible, because they change two souls forever without the world ever knowing. Forbidden love does not weaken emotion. It refines and concentrates it. When two people feel drawn to each other but cannot openly express or fulfill that connection, the feeling does not simply disappear. Instead, it turns inward and begins to expand within the private chambers of the psyche. What is denied external expression often gains internal power. The very act of suppression creates psychological tension. And tension is the fuel of intensity. When love is allowed, it flows naturally into shared experiences, conversations, and physical presence. But when it is forbidden, it has no outlet, circulates within, deepening, amplifying, and sometimes overwhelming the inner world. Human desire is paradoxical. What is accessible often becomes familiar, and familiarity can soften intensity. What is restricted, however, becomes charged with meaning. The barrier itself creates focus. Every glance feels significant. Every accidental touch carries electricity. Every conversation feels layered with what cannot be said. The impossibility sharpens awareness. One becomes hyperconscious of the other person. As presence, tone, mood, and subtle shifts in energy, the mind replays interactions repeatedly, analyzing hidden meanings and unspoken signals. Emotion becomes magnified because it has nowhere else to go. There is also a psychological phenomenon at work. Resistance increases attachment. When something stands in the way of desire, the mind begins to romanticize it. The connection can grow larger than reality because it is not tested by ordinary daily life, remains suspended in imagination, untouched by routine or conflict. In this suspended state, it becomes almost archetypal, representing longing, possibility, and the unlived life. The forbidden nature of the bond allows it to stay idealized, and idealization strengthens emotional intensity. At the same time, suppression creates inner conflict. One part of the self longs to move toward the connection, another part insists on restraint. This division creates emotional pressure. The more one tries to control or silence the feeling, the more persistent it becomes. Thoughts return at unexpected moments. Dreams may carry the image of the person. Emotional reactions become disproportionate to small interactions. The psyche resists being told what it is not allowed to feel. Forbidden love also intensifies because it demands secrecy. Secrecy requires constant awareness. Words must be chosen carefully. Expressions must be monitored. Physical proximity must be measured. This heightened vigilance keeps the emotional field alive and alert. Even silence between two people can feel loud. The unspoken becomes as powerful as spoken confession. What cannot be acknowledged openly becomes sacred in private. Furthermore, when love is restricted by moral, social, or circumstantial boundaries, it forces individuals to confront their own values and fears. This confrontation deepens emotional involvement. The connection is no longer just attraction. It becomes a psychological crossroads. It asks difficult questions about loyalty, identity, responsibility, and courage. Such questions stir the depths of the soul, and anything that stirs the depths tends to intensify emotion. In this way, forbidden love does not fade quietly. It grows in the shadows. It feeds on imagination, restraint, longing, and internal struggle. It may never be lived out in reality, but internally it can shape thoughts, choices, and self-understanding in profound ways. What is denied expression often becomes unforgettable, not because it was fully experienced, but because it was not. Silence is often misunderstood. In a world that equates expression with sincerity, we assume that if someone feels deeply, they will speak loudly. Yet silence can be one of the most intense forms of emotional containment. It is not always the absence of feeling. Sometimes it is the presence of too much feeling. When a person chooses silence, it may not be because they are indifferent, but because what they carry inside is complex, conflicted, or too powerful to release without consequence. To contain emotion requires strength. Indifference is easy. It asks nothing of us. But to feel something deeply and deliberately restrain, it demands awareness and discipline. Silence can become a psychological container, a boundary that prevents emotion from spilling into chaos. In situations where expression could cause harm, disrupt stability, or violate values, silence becomes a form of protection. It shields not only the other person, but also the one who feels. When emotions are complicated by circumstance, timing, or moral conflict, speaking them aloud may create irreversible change. Words have weight. Once spoken, they cannot be retrieved. Silence, then, is sometimes a conscious decision to hold tension rather than release it impulsively. It allows a person to process their inner world without forcing external consequences. This containment can look like distance or detachment from the outside, but internally it may be a storm carefully managed. There are moments when silence is the only space where dignity can survive. If love or desire cannot be acted upon without betrayal or destruction, remaining quiet can be an act of integrity. It is a way of honoring boundaries while still acknowledging inner truth. The feeling is not denied, it is simply not displayed. In this way, silence becomes a private acknowledgement rather than a public declaration. Psychologically, containment serves an important function. It prevents raw emotion from overwhelming reason. It allows reflection instead of reaction. When someone holds their feelings in silence, they may be trying to understand them more fully. Not every emotion needs immediate expression. Some require time to unfold, to be examined, to be integrated into the broader structure of one's life. Silence creates that space. Silence can also be protective toward the beloved. Expressing certain feelings may place pressure, create confusion, or burden the other person with a conflict they did not choose. By remaining silent, one may be choosing compassion. They may recognize that voicing their emotions would shift the dynamic in ways that are unfair or destabilizing. So they carry the weight alone. This is not indifference, it is consideration. Furthermore, silence intensifies awareness. When words are withheld, attention sharpens. Every interaction becomes charged with subtle meaning. Eye contact lingers, small gestures become significant. Communication moves beneath the surface. What is unspoken can be felt in tone, in pauses, in the way someone chooses to stay or step back. Silence becomes its own language, quiet, restrained, but alive. Indifference feels cold and disconnected. Contained emotion, however, often carries warmth beneath restraint. The person may still show care in indirect ways, offering support, remembering details, maintaining presence without crossing lines. Their silence does not erase their feeling. It shapes how that feeling is expressed. It transforms passion into watchfulness, desire into respect, impulse into patience. In many cases, silence is the most responsible response to a complicated emotional reality. It is not emptiness but control, not lack of depth, but depth carefully guarded. What appears calm on the surface may conceal powerful currents beneath. Silence, then, is not the absence of love. It is love disciplined by circumstance, shaped by conscience, and contained by choice. Inner conflict creates distance not because the feeling is weak, but because it is divided. When a person experiences two opposing forces within themselves, desire and responsibility, longing and fear, attachment and restraint, the result is psychological tension. This tension does not remain neatly contained inside. It spills outward in subtle ways, often appearing as withdrawal, inconsistency, or emotional unavailability. The distance that forms is not always a reflection of what they feel for you. It is often a reflection of what they cannot reconcile within themselves. When someone is internally conflicted, they are pulled in opposite directions. One part of them wants closeness, connection, and emotional honesty. Another part warns of consequences, risks, or moral boundaries. These competing voices create hesitation. Instead of moving forward naturally, they pause. Instead of leaning in fully, they step back. This push and pull dynamic is exhausting, and distance becomes a coping mechanism. By creating space externally, they attempt to quiet the chaos internally. Distance can feel safer than confrontation. Face inner conflict requires courage, the courage to question one's choices, commitments, identity, and values. Not everyone is ready for that level of self-examination, so rather than resolving the conflict, they manage it by limiting exposure to what triggers it. If being near you intensifies their feelings and deepens their confusion, they may reduce contact. The space is not necessarily about rejecting you. It is about protecting themselves from emotional overload. Inner conflict also produces inconsistency. One day they may appear warm and engaged because the part of them that longs for connection is in control. Another day they may seem distant or cold because the part driven by caution or fear has taken over. This unpredictability is not manipulation in every case, it is fragmentation. They have not integrated their opposing emotions into a clear decision. Until integration happens, distance becomes the default state. There is also guilt that accompanies inner conflict. If their feelings challenge existing commitments or personal principles, they may experience shame simply for feeling what they feel. Guilt creates self-protection. To reduce guilt, they may convince themselves to detach. They may rationalize distance as the right thing to do. In doing so, they attempt to restore internal balance, even if it means sacrificing emotional closeness. Psychologically, unresolved tension seeks relief. Some people resolve it through honest conversation and decisive action. Others resolve it through avoidance. Avoidance creates physical or emotional distance because distance lowers intensity. The fewer interactions, the fewer triggers. The fewer triggers, the quieter the internal battle. It is a temporary solution, but it can feel necessary for someone who feels overwhelmed by their own emotions. Distance born from inner conflict often carries sadness beneath it. It is rarely indifferent or carefree. There is weight in it, hesitation in it, sometimes even regret. The person may watch from afar, maintaining awareness, while refusing proximity. They are not free enough to move closer, yet not detached enough to walk away completely. So they remain suspended, neither fully present nor fully gone, until a person resolves the war within themselves. Closeness will always feel unstable. Inner harmony is required for consistent intimacy. When the internal world is divided, external relationships mirror that division. Distance, then, is not always a sign of absence of love. It is often a sign of an unresolved self. Hidden affection rarely announces itself with dramatic confessions or obvious displays. Instead, it reveals itself through subtle behaviors that often go unnoticed by those who expect love to be loud. When someone cannot openly express their feelings, their emotions find quieter pathways. The heart, even when restrained, seeks small openings through which it can be seen. These openings appear in gestures, in attention, in the delicate ways someone positions themselves in your life without crossing visible boundaries. One of the clearest signs of concealed affection is heightened attentiveness. They remember details you mentioned in passing, a favorite book, a stressful meeting, a childhood memory. They bring these details back into conversation later, not in a dramatic way, but casually, as if it were nothing. Yet memory is never nothing. To remember is to value. When someone holds on to the small pieces of your world, it suggests that you occupy space in theirs more than they admit. There is also the quality of presence. Even when they cannot be openly expressive, they find reasons to remain near. They may not initiate constant communication, but when you reach out, they respond with depth and care. In group settings, their attention subtly orients toward you. Their body language shifts almost unconsciously, a slight lean, prolonged eye contact, a softening of expression when you speak. These movements are rarely calculated. They emerge from the body as honesty when the mouth remains silent. Protection is another quiet indicator. Someone who harbors hidden affection often becomes quietly supportive. They defend you when you are not present. They offer help without seeking recognition. They may step in during difficult moments, ensuring your comfort or safety, but they do so in a way that avoids drawing attention to their motive. This kind of care is not possessive. It is watchful. It reflects concern that does not demand ownership. Tone also reveals what words conceal. There is a difference between polite conversation and emotionally invested dialogue. When hidden affection exists, the tone carries warmth beneath restraint. Even neutral exchanges may feel charged with underlying sincerity. Their voice may soften unexpectedly. Pauses may linger slightly longer. Silence between you may feel full rather than empty. Emotional energy flows subtly, creating an undercurrent that both of you can sense but neither openly names. Sometimes hidden affection shows itself in restraint itself. They may deliberately limit certain interactions, not out of indifference, but because proximity intensifies feeling. This self-control can be a sign of depth. If there were no emotion, there would be no need for caution. The very effort to maintain boundaries suggests that something meaningful exists beneath the surface. Jealousy, when it appears, is often muted but visible in micro-expressions. A fleeting tension in the jaw, a brief withdrawal when you mention someone else. It is quickly masked, replaced with composure. Yet the momentary reaction speaks more honestly than any declaration could. The psyche reacts before the persona regains control. Consistency is perhaps the most telling subtle behavior. Hidden affection does not always manifest as constant intensity, but it shows a steady regard. They check in indirectly. They celebrate your successes sincerely. They notice when your mood shifts. Even if they cannot claim a role in your life, they remain quietly invested in your well-being. Affection does not vanish simply because it cannot be spoken. It adapts. It moves through glances, through timing, through protective gestures and careful distance. In subtle behaviors, truth often finds its most authentic expression, because what is restrained by circumstance still seeks to be felt. Forbidden connections have a peculiar power to awaken parts of us we rarely confront. They do not simply stir attraction. They stir the hidden layers of the psyche, the desires we have suppressed, the impulses we have judged, the longings we have buried beneath responsibility and routine. When a connection is labeled forbidden, it immediately moves into the realm of the shadow, the unconscious aspects of ourselves that we prefer not to identify with, yet secretly carry. The shadow is not inherently dark or immoral. It is simply the collection of traits, wishes, and emotions we have disowned in order to function within society. We learn early which parts of ourselves are acceptable and which are not. Over time, we construct an identity that aligns with expectations: responsible, loyal, rational, controlled. But beneath that constructed self, other energies remain alive. Passion that feels inconvenient, curiosity that feels dangerous, needs that feel selfish. Forbidden connections have a way of illuminating these buried elements with startling clarity. when we feel drawn to someone we should not desire. The intensity often surprises us. It feels disproportionate, almost irrational. That intensity is not only about the other person, it is about what they represent. They may embody qualities we have denied in ourselves: spontaneity, boldness, emotional depth, vulnerability, or even rebellion. Our attraction becomes a mirror. Through them, we glimpse the unlived version of our own life. The shadow stirs because it recognizes itself. This awakening can feel destabilizing. The conscious self wants order and coherence. It values commitment, structure, and identity stability. The shadow does not prioritize these things. It seeks wholeness, even if wholeness disrupts comfort. When a forbidden connection activates the shadow, inner tension emerges. We may feel both exhilarated and ashamed, both alive and conflicted. The conflict is evidence that something deeper than surface attraction is at work. Often, we project our shadow onto the other person. We see them as mysterious, powerful, or transformative. In reality, they are carrying the qualities we have not yet integrated within ourselves. The forbidden nature of the bond intensifies projection because it prevents ordinary interaction from balancing perception. The less we can openly explore the connection, the more symbolic it becomes. It grows larger in our imagination, charged with meaning that extends beyond the actual relationship. At the same time, forbidden connections challenge the persona, the mask we present to the world. If acting on the connection would threaten our image or disrupt our roles, we are forced to confront how much of our life is built on adaptation rather than authenticity. The shadow asks uncomfortable questions. What have you sacrificed to maintain this identity? What desires have you silenced to remain acceptable? What parts of yourself are still waiting to be acknowledged? The purpose of the shadow is not to destroy our lives, but to expand them. When we become aware of what a forbidden connection awakens in us, we are given an opportunity for growth. We can choose conscious integration instead of impulsive action. We can explore the qualities we are drawn to without necessarily violating our values. The connection becomes a catalyst for self-knowledge. In this way, forbidden bonds are psychologically potent. They reveal the hidden architecture of our inner world. They expose contradictions between who we are and who we might be. And though they may never be lived out externally, their true impact lies in the confrontation they force within, a confrontation with the shadow that ultimately invites deeper self-understanding. Some relationships enter our lives not to stay, but to change us. We often assume that the value of a connection is measured by its duration, as if permanence were the ultimate proof of meaning. Yet time is not the only measure of significance. There are encounters that last months, sometimes even weeks, yet alter the direction of our inner world more profoundly than years of familiarity ever could. These relationships are not designed for stability, they are designed for awakening. Transformative relationships tend to arrive at moments of transition. They appear when we are questioning our identity, when we feel restless in our current life, or when an unseen part of us is ready to emerge. The person becomes a catalyst. Through conversation, conflict, attraction, or even heartbreak, they activate dormant aspects of our psyche. They challenge our assumptions, confront our fears, and expose patterns we were previously unconscious of. In their presence, we begin to see ourselves more clearly, not always comfortably, but truthfully. Unlike permanent bonds, transformative ones often carry intensity rather than steadiness. There is a heightened emotional charge, a sense of urgency, sometimes even chaos. This intensity is not accidental. It disrupts routine and forces awareness. We are pulled out of autopilot. Old coping mechanisms stop working. We are confronted with choices we have avoided. The relationship becomes a mirror, reflecting both our light and our shadow. What we admire in the other person reveals our aspirations. What triggers us reveals our wounds. Because these relationships are catalytic, they rarely remain unchanged. Once their purpose has been fulfilled, once the lesson has been integrated or the awareness awakened, the dynamic often shifts. Sometimes external circumstances make continuation impossible. Other times, the emotional intensity that once bonded two people naturally dissolves after growth occurs. This ending can feel painful, especially if we mistake transformation for destiny. We may grieve not only the person, but the imagined future attached to them. Yet impermanence does not negate importance. A teacher does not become meaningless because the class ends. A season does not lose value because it passes. In the same way, a transformative relationship fulfills its role by altering our inner structure. After it, we may set stronger boundaries, pursue a different path, understand our needs more clearly, or recognize unhealthy patterns we once tolerated. The change remains, even if the person does not. There is also humility in accepting that not every powerful connection is meant to be sustained. Clinging to something whose purpose has been fulfilled can create unnecessary suffering. Growth requires movement. When we try to freeze a transformative bond into permanence, we resist the very evolution it initiated. The real gift was never possession, it was expansion. Often, we only understand the meaning of such relationships in retrospect. At the time, the emotions feel overwhelming, confusing, or consuming, but later we see how that person marked a turning point. We trace new strengths, insights, or decisions back to their influence. They may no longer be physically present, yet their impact continues quietly within us. Some relationships are chapters, not entire books. They do not accompany us to the end of our story, but they shape the plot in ways that cannot be undone. Their role is not to remain, it is to transform. So if you find yourself inside a connection that cannot fully exist, do not reduce it to tragedy or mistake. Ask instead what it awakened within you. Ask what it revealed about your needs, your fears, your shadow, your strength. Not every love is meant to be lived out loud. Some are meant to deepen you, to confront you, to refine you. If they love you in silence and you feel the unspoken truth between you, understand that sometimes restraint carries more weight than confession. Sometimes distance protects what closeness would destroy. And sometimes the purpose of a bond is not possession, but transformation. Let this connection teach you. Let it expand your awareness rather than shrink your integrity. Whether it fades into memory or remains a quiet presence in your heart, honor what it changed in you. Because in the end, the most powerful relationships are not the ones that simply stay. They are the ones that awaken your soul and leave you more conscious than you were before.